Mhm. And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I want to talk about a couple things. And I think the big one is what I think is on a lot of people's mind recently. And that's kind of being cash poor in this hobby. And believe it or not, when I was in Denver and talking to a bunch of the guys that were uh, at their booths and just, talking about the market, one of the things that came up pretty often was a lot of people described how they're cash poor. Now, just so everyone knows, cash poor is not the same as being broke in this hobby or not having cards worth any money. Cash poor is very different. All cash poor means is that a lot of your money is tied up in, different cards or different slabs, or you got different plays going on. Because one of the things that I don't hear enough people talk about all the time is we always talk about when the market's going crazy and it's just sell, 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 or when the market's kind of dropping down, it's like, okay, if you could start to find your really good buys or things you start to think are undervalued, maybe you should buy them up. But one of the things we don't talk about enough is being prepared. And all being prepared means is when the market hopefully does go up in value again, how can you capitalize? And one of the real simple ways to capitalize this, and I don't want to downplay it too much, but one of the easiest ways to be ready is just to have plenty of cards graded, but more importantly, already have your cards listed on eBay, already have your channels where you're going to get that product out to people, because when the market does go up, that's very important. But another aspect of that is, even though the market is relatively illiquid right now, and when I say illiquid, there is definitely a lot of stuff that is currently selling like crazy. And just very recently, I just got back my $18 PSA submission. It was like a huge saving grace for me because I started to get a lot of that more cash again because I was able to sell a lot of stuff. And a lot of the plays that I'm selling right now are the ones that were what I considered to be more the short-term plays and really within this window of time. So there's multiple steps you got to do. One, you have to have a lot of stuff graded. You have to have it on your eBay. It has to be ready for if the market ever comes around. But that second part, which I was just alluding to, is you need that stuff that's still going to sell on a day-to-day basis. Because for some people out there, yes, maybe they have just unlimited amount of money and they never need to buy or sell. But some people like me, probably like many of you, we need the hobby to help grow the hobby. And in order to help the hobby grow the hobby is you got to constantly be moving stuff, buying stuff, selling stuff. Some of it can be speculative. Some of the stuff, it could be things you think are a slam dunk play. And very recently, just right now at the time of recording this video, when the Charizard UPC finally gets released to everybody again, I don't have distributor agreements, so I'm not getting these things early. Really, I need to wait for Friday, October 28th, and hope that some of my Target pre-orders or my Pokemon Center pre-orders are not late, and hope that when I walk into my local GameStop that they're actually going to have my Charizard UPCs available on Friday, the ones that I've already pre-ordered and paid for. Hopefully this all happens, because when that does, I'm going to be making a lot of plays. I've already made it pretty transparent on this channel if you've watched any of my other videos. And if you haven't watched those videos and you're new to this channel, we do a lot of these Pokemon conversations. I recommend you going down, smashing that subscribe button, or going back and looking at a lot of my different videos, because I talk about a lot of these similar things. But one of the things I'm going to be doing with that Charizard UPC is I'm taking what some people might consider a high risk, meaning I have a lot of money going out, a lot of the money already out there, meaning these UPCs are already all paid for. And now getting those, instantly sending them to PSA at a very high dollar amount. Well, high dollar amount being subjective. So let's just say $100 or more, sending them each card at $100, trying to get these back quickly, list them, and play that very, dangerous game of hot potato, or that dangerous game of, can the market actually support this? Because I could tell you right now, I'm not the only one doing this. This could, in from the outside looking in and looking at how all other products pretty much recently have played out, it's probably not as high risk as a play as a lot of people might think it is from the outside looking in. But there's always that chance. There's always the chance that the market can play the ultimate game of race to the bottom on these Charizard promos in particular. I think the Charizard DPC, I'm already hearing people being so crazily or like not bullish, but crazily negative on this product. I'm already heard people talking about how this thing is going to crash below MSRP, and people are waiting to pick it up between $90 and $100. Like, if people out there think that that's a possibility, like, more power to you. I don't really see that as being a high likelihood. And even if it did happen, meaning, let's say in the event that it does crash from, the MSRP of 119 and they do sell for 90, which that would mean that people who are buying these from distributors after shipping and fees and everything would actually be losing money on these. But let's just say that does happen. Listen, I'm okay with paying the $20 extra to pay the 119.99, or if you're picking them up at 90 to pay that 30. Like, believe it or not, like, that's one of those positions where I'm comfortable just paying MSRP for a product, because I personally don't think that's going to happen. And if it does happen, I think my downside risk to that is very minimal. I don't ever see the Charizard UPC selling at like a $60 or $50, where now I'm losing 50% of my money, but that doesn't matter anyways, because the plays I'm doing are all single plays. But this runs into the being cash poor in a liquid hobby. So one of the things about being cash poor in this hobby right now is when these plays do come up, if you don't have the money set aside, or you're not ready to do this, you could either be doing one or two things. One, you're going to have to just pass on this opportunity, meaning you're just going to let it go by and you're going to say, I can't do it because I don't have the money. Or you also could be running into the also extremely dangerous part of just leveraging debt, like putting it on a credit card, worrying about it later, and just crossing your fingers and praying to God that this thing doesn't totally, backfire and blow up in your face, which I think, in the relatively recent past, I think a lot of people have been able to do that and weren't like extremely destroyed, assuming that the things they were buying like made sense, and they weren't just buying things at the peak of peak and the height of heights, meaning they were actually making like rational plays where, like that short-term flippability, because this hobby definitely has that short-term flippability. But I'm starting to notice a lot of people being relatively cash poor, and the illiquidity of this market, it is there, but it's also not there. And like, I know it's the most counterintuitive thing to say, is like the illiquidity is there, but then it's also not there. Where I'm seeing the strongest illiquidity on cards is 9 or lower. And I know that's just, and this is especially when it comes to graded cards, that 9 or lower grade for a lot of people, those things move very poorly. And I know a lot of people like the CGC play, and they're hoping for the perfect tens, or if you have a really true pristine card, some people even they try to do the Beckett play, something I've never personally tried to do, but some people do like to do that, which it makes sense to do that Beckett play and try to get that black label. But that's all like, very dangerous. And then really the premium always comes with a 10. When you go from a card that can be relatively illiquid to a card that becomes extremely liquid, like that difference between the 9 or 10, especially when it comes to like super modern cards, it becomes vast. Now, this is the thing. PSA 9s are a little more liquid than CGC 9s. So just be very careful the plays you're doing, if this is your intention in mind. And I don't want it to be like every single video I bash on CGC, and that's not it. But just be very careful that your CGC 9.5s or your CGC 9s are gonna perform extremely different than, say, your PSA 9s or your PSA 10s. And especially if some of the cards you did submit and you got 9s could have been true PSA 10 contenders, you will find in this hobby that your liquidity of your cards, and especially selling them on the cards that are not again, this is not part of your like PC collection. These are cards that you graded with the sole intention to flip or make money. And like I said, to free up cash to help continue to grow your collection. If that is your mindset, like, just be understanding that these different grades by different grading card companies, the liquidity of these cards is going to be vastly, vastly different. So if you are doing this play, please do it like looking at the market, and take away all your biases. If you're going to be doing this on a strictly financial play, take away your biases, look at the market, and look at what certain grading card companies are selling for. It's pretty like simple. But yeah, that was
Mm.
like one of the things I want to talk about is just like being cash poor versus, like having like illiquid cards. But then you also run into this weird gray area where sometimes it's okay for your cards to be illiquid if you buy now in this hobby, no matter when you got in this hobby. I don't care if you got in this hobby and go back in 99 and you never left, or if you just got back in 2020 and then you were around for 2021, 2022. This is the thing. You can still have a liquid cards if you truly believe that those cards are undervalued. And that is the same now. It was the same 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. If you have a card and you truly believe that the market undervalues that card, it doesn't mean that you need to just fire sale that card all the time. So like start to understand that there is a difference. And I think right now in the hobby, in the market currently as it's playing out today, I think there are still a ton of cards that are undervalued. But now this is the thing too. In an illiquid market, you also should try to not be cash poor if you don't have to, because in a more illiquid market, you'll start to find people that are trying to sell stuff or trying to move stuff that they're finding to be very illiquid. If you have the cash available, there will start to become price points in this hobby or different fire sales or where people are trying to get out of certain positions of certain cards. So if you're there and you have the ability and the free capital to pick up some of these cards, we could be starting to move into a timeline in this hobby where we could potentially start to see some of the best deals we've ever seen, because you have a couple like catalysts coming to head. One, you got all these bulk returns coming back from PSA. They're more or less finished with the backlog. Yes, PSA still has some orders out from like 2020 or like late 2020 if you went with a middleman, whether it was like Ludkins or whatever. And then they're still getting a few returns back for that bulk for like early 2021. But for the most part, PSA already seems to be pretty much, through their backlog. So a lot of these cards are going to be coming on the market. And a lot of these cards, people will do, especially like on the $18 submission. If you submitted like 200 plus cards, you're talking closer to $4,000 worth of grading fees and further away from $4,000 worth of grading fees. So if you get hit with these grading bills, and that's just like a 200 card submission at $18, like that's that's a very easy number to get to. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people in this chat could easily submit $200 at $18. So if people didn't really, if they were very cash poor at the time and didn't have the liquid funds, you can start to see people start to fire sale these cards, and really be playing that race to the bottom and being that lowest possible auction or that lowest possible buy it now, on eBay currently at the market. But now this is where you need to not be cash poor. And I know it's really hard for people, especially because as the market starts to do this downturn, people are going to start to, recognize and see these, buying opportunities there. So it's going to entice people. It's like a weird, like double down effect where maybe you're a little bit more cash poor, but now you're starting to see all these good buys come up. So what are you doing? You're still buying, but as you're buying, all the cards you're still sitting on maybe are becoming a little more illiquid. And, a liquid could just be as simple as you have a few hundred cards listed on your eBay page. You used to be in like a nice position where like 10 or 15 of your cards would sell every single day, and you would be able to just like, slowly replace those cards as they would sell. You would, put new cards on the listing, and maybe it went from 10 sales a day. Then you drop down to 10, or you went from 15 sales to 10 sales, and now you're down to like 5 sales a day. Or maybe if you're like really struggling, you're down to like 2 or 1 sales a day. If that happens, your cash coming in is going to start to very quickly ramp up to be way less than the cash going out. And ideally, you always want the cash you have coming in from your sales being way more than the cash you're pumping out there. So it's just a lot of little things to keep in mind. But and one of the things too is one of the best advice I give people, if you are starting to look at your cards, if you're starting to look at, your collection as a whole, you need, and this is something that's worked for me, this may not work for everybody, But when you start to look at your collection, you need to really start to look at it and realize like the cards you truly care about, the cards you truly appreciate. And one of the things that I'm trying to do and have been trying to do now for about 2 years timeline, really since the hobby kicked off and I sold a lot of cards, is I've really tried to make my collection have an identity to it. Because for a while, my collection really lost all sense of an identity to it. Meaning, as you would flip through different cards, you would see cards from different timelines. Yeah, they would maybe have a little cool backstory here and there, but there would be no identity to my collection. And once I did that, once I started selling off all the stuff that I felt didn't have like true, collection identity for myself, I really started to appreciate the cards I had even that much more. So, that's one thing you need to do too, is if you are starting to become a little bit cash poor, take a look at your collection and say, are we still in a seller's market? Are we in a buyer's market? Where are we when it comes to that certain card? Because the market's going to constantly be different no matter, where your collection is. Is your collection super modern? Is it semi-modern? Is it semi-vintage? Is it vintage? Is it super rare trophy cards? Is it, high-end stuff? Is it Japanese? Where are you in your collection? What is the set identity of, and where are each card individual? And that's the thing. You can't do blanket statements in this hobby. Blanket statements are next to impossible because really, when you talk about cards, when you talk about the market, when you're talking about liquidity of cards or illiquidity of cards, it's so super dependent on individual cards. So as you do that, you know, start to make, an identity to your collection because I think you're going to end up finding out that that's going to be like super beneficial for you in the long term. But that, don't get me wrong, there will also be a lot of short-term plays right now moving into this hobby. This is the thing too. For me, I already made it extremely transparent. I made it transparent in this video. Every live I've been on, pretty much a lot of my most recent videos, I've been transparent with you guys that I'm making this hard play with the Charizard UPC. But once this is over, and once that real hard play I'm going at, where it's going to end up being thousands of dollars, this play is going to play out, whether or not it's a success, whether it's and you can think about baseball terminology. Is it going to be a single? Is it going to be a double? Is it going to be a triple, a home run? Or am I just going to strike out at the plate and everybody, is going to be looking at me striking out? Like it could be the worst of worst situations. But this is the thing. After the Charizard UPC play dries up, which I think it will, there are other plays that I think are still going on, which ironically I thought would have dried up faster. Like I'll give you another example, like the special livery Charizard. Picking that card up, prices have already dropped drastically low. You can pick up a Charizard code for, like I think at the low they hit like right around $4 and change. I think after Pokemon Center sent out that email saying they're no longer going to send out codes, and if you haven't got it now, you kind of lost your opportunity. And I think we've seen prices for those codes, bump up a little bit. I think they're sitting between like $6 and $8, depending on the eBay seller. That was a play that I thought was a very short-term play, picking those cards up, grading them, but then come to find out, like as recently as today, before this video, like looking at what recent PSA 10 prices are selling for and even PSA 9 prices selling for. Again, this is a free card that now in reality costs like between $25 to $30 because it's a $5 card for the code. You got to spend $25 on Pokemon Center for free ship. And so you're all into that card for $30. And looking at what that card's still selling for today, like just that card, you could pretty much break even and sell it for around the price of all that product on Pokemon Center is more or less going to be free. And again, this is all going back to this play was still available. This play was still happening. How it was still happening, I don't know, but it was. And that brings into like the special delivery Charizard play. Like, is it potential that it could have the same exact lifespan as a special delivery Charizard? Because all the knowledge we have, all the things we discuss in this hobby, talking about supply versus demand versus grading versus, hype trains and, speculative plays and all this stuff, like that special delivery Charizard, again, a card that is free, a card that if anyone wants, you can get it. Like yes, I get it. Some people did not get the Pokemon Center code. And if you didn't, I'm sorry. You missed out on like one code. But there's really nobody out there can give that excuse anymore that they didn't have the option to get it. Because with the codes that are available on eBay, like it's a very doable thing. But that play was still there. So it comes back to like this liquidity thing and being cash, having cash on hand, because after the Charizard UPC play is over, and more or less the special livery Charizard is going to, at least buying those cards and, inserting your promo code and having them delivered to you come the end of December, like that's going to be gone. You're going to have special livery Charizard is going to be gone, dried up. The Charizard UPC is going to dry up. And then what is there to look forward to after that? Like, are there any speculative plays in the short term? Because this is the thing. Using this hobby for your benefit is not always a bad thing. Like, it's a good thing, meaning you're spending the time and you're really crunching the numbers and you're doing these plays based off of all the experience that you have in the hobby, but then also doing this with the mindset with something in the back of your head saying this could backfire and just totally blow up in my face. Like that is always a possibility. But like after the special livery Charizard and the Charizard UPC, like I don't see any plays like in the near future. These plays have now played out for years. At least the speculation between the Charizard, special livery Charizard play, like we were introduced to that card in the Sword and Shield guidebooks. And yes, it took an extremely long time to get that card. And in the middle and in between that card, between, you know, the timeline pretty much goes special livery Pikachu to being introduced to that card in the Sword and Shield guidebook. And then in between, like you got the special delivery Bidoof was just kind of thrown in there. It was just a curveball that hit everybody. And then all this build up to the special delivery Charizard and looking at what that thing is selling at in a 10, like you cannot look at most current PSA 10 sales and say that there was not a play there. Like you cannot do that because it's as simple as just looking at your most recent eBay sales of realizing that there was a play there. And then that play lasted forever. And then as soon as the special delivery Charizard, or the Charizard special delivery, the Charizard UPC, this is what happens when you go live. You start to, stutter. A lot of Charizards there. But, like the Charizard UPC, as soon as that was like put out to the public, people started making the comparisons to like celebrations, UPCs. What can prices start to do? What is supply going to look like? And we've seen the supply. The supply is massive. I don't know how the supply is really as big as it is because we're now seeing it sit on, Target websites for hours and Walmart's website for hours and Pokemon Center's having so many drops and like the in-store pre-order for, GameStop. Like there was a lot of these things. But then on my channel, we've also had this conversation more times than not. We've constantly said, what is Pokemon printing right now? And that was a conversation we've always had because especially it goes back as recent as like the Evolving Skies reprint. The Evolving Skies reprint we got, a lot of us were speculating like Pokemon could in reality take Evolving Skies, a super hype product, a super in-demand booster box, potentially one of the most in-demand booster boxes we've seen like throughout all the hype of Pokemon. Like that could arguably be the highest hype. And like we speculated that if Pokemon wanted to print enough of that, that they could crush that price in reality down to a Chill and Rain booster box level or battle styles. I think we all kind of came into agreement that that was extremely unlikely, no matter how big the print run is. But in a speculative, like worst case scenario, like sure, I guess there does exist a number out there, whether that's a billion booster boxes or a trillion booster boxes. Like there always becomes a number out there that if they print enough of them, sure, you can really see prices crash that like drastically. But as Evolving Skies came out and we saw like, yeah, right at release, they were floating right out, like that 130 mark. You could pick them up on some websites like relatively low. Yeah, there was like your outlier websites were selling them for like 110, 120, but the market really settled at like 130. And that only happened for like a span of a couple days after release. And then almost instantly after, all these booster boxes started jacking up in price. So we then had to, step back and say, okay, Well, it does not appear that Pokemon printers were in the background just going burr the whole time and they were just printing the crap out of Evolving Skies, because that's what we were speculating. And then the question started again. It was the same question we asked: what are Pokemon printing? It could wind up that the thing that Pokemon has been printing all this time, that $1 million question that nobody had an answer to because we were constantly, wrong every time we would guess. Even the same thing as like Lost Origins. Lost Origins had that very weird release where they were like back to the single wave system, like the one and done. And we're moving away from like, okay, it's going to trickle on different waves. And yeah, there was like small waves came from distributors, but nothing like, massive dumps like we become accustomed to, because again, we are living in this new market where like the wave system became a new thing that we've become accustomed to, going back all the way to battle styles. Like battle styles right at release was relatively expensive. Wave 2 knocked it down a little bit more, and then wave 3 absolutely crushed. I don't think there's a better example of a relatively decent modern booster box like Chill and Rain after that third wave. And yes, it was the perfect storm where you had like your battle styles and Chill and Rain and Fusion Strike and Evolving Skies all kind of dumped, to people at one time, and those were probably the poor performance sets, so they really got beat down the hardest. So, but that was it. The conversation was like, what is Pokemon printing? And it could wind up that the thing that Pokemon's printing all this time is that Charizard UPC. Because I honestly, at this point, I told you, I have no clue how like a Walmart could have a purchase order limit of 10. Do you know how much 10 UPCs are? UPCs is not a small product. Like UPCs get shipped out in cases of 4. And it's not like, sure, booster boxes get shipped out on cases of 3, but they're at least like narrow, skinny, you know, cardboard boxes. These Charizard UPCs, again, this Charizard UPC is actually a little bit bigger than the Celebrations UPC. So that means the cardboard box it's going to be shipped in is just that much bigger. The amount of space just 10 Charizard UPCs takes up, that means you're talking 2 full cardboard boxes and then a half of another one. How much room these freaking, Charizard Ultra Premium Collection must take up is a fucking insane amount. Like, I gotta say that if Walmart was, actually allowing these 10, Charizard UPCs per order, and again, I know a lot of people weren't able to add it onto their cart. The big workaround for that was mainly just already have an account with Walmart. You just had to log into your account with Walmart. And then once you were logged in and you had your account all set up, then you were able to add it to your cart. Or the same thing with like, your, it's just, these things must take up so much room in warehouses, and it's crazy to think about. But if this was the case where, shout out to Mason from Cardinal Gaming, he did his good breakdown of one of the print facilities where, I want to say it was like Ultra Prism or one of those sets where they showed like how they get the original copies from Japan and then they add like the English to it. But then at the, during that video, they showed the Pokemon warehouse and it's just pallets stacked double high and it freaking looks like bigger than the size of a football field and just big building and just pallets for days. If that was the case and that's what Pokemon was doing, was just in the background, the printers are still going burr, but the one product they were pumping out was just these Charizard UPCs. Like, it's possible. And if they really wanted to like bump up that bottom line number, maybe they were starting to get a little bit nervous that sales were going to start to tank a little bit. Very similar to like what we saw happen now with Wizard of the Coast and the Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary set. I don't think there's really anybody out there is questioning like what that play was by Wizard of the Coast and Hasbro. Like, it was simply like, let's juice every dollar we can get out and let's pinch every dollar we can get out of our collector base or our player base, because, again, that's like that Wizard of the Coast 30th anniversary. That's 4 packs for $1,000, $250 per pack. Like, I don't care how nice the box might look. $250 per pack is the profit margin on an item like that must be insane. And I bet you it's very similar for, like these Charizard UPCs, the profit margin that the Pokemon Center International must be making must be insane. Again, these Charizard cards in reality, they're just just textured cards. They're nothing more than that. So they're easily mass produced. Like the amount of these cards that will probably get produced at the end of the day is probably just going to be like an unbelievable dollar amount. So that's where I want to talk about today. Also, I did have somebody in one of my comments right. You can never trust a guy that doesn't put ice in his water. And I'm gonna admit he probably was onto something. The water that is in my glass does come out of my refrigerator, so it is cold. But yes, I did put ice, and the ice has already melted. But he brought up a fantastic point. So we got to that point. I had to go live a little earlier today because it is going to be the last episode of the new Game of Thrones season. So I have to watch that. I promised that to my wife. So as soon as this live is over, that is what I'm going to watch. It'll be nice though. It'll play a little bit in the background, so I won't miss much. So we got Brody Smith in the house. He says, "Hey PK, first live, woohoo, dude! That's awesome, man. I'm happy that people are still making it to their first lives after all these. That's a good thing. I think the hobby is still growing too, and that's the thing too. We might be in like this hobby that seems to be a little bit more illiquid, but the hobby's still growing. Like I'm still constantly seeing new people trickle in, like more enthusiasm, people really starting to think outside the box, stuff like that. I think this hobby could really do things. And if I thought this hobby couldn't do things, then that would probably be like one of the Saturdays after everything we've gone through. But I think it's the complete opposite. We got Jimmy Blake in the chat. Good to see you, man. Tennis Wolf. I got to meet Tennis Wolf in person. He's an awesome dude. Yeah, he's a good dude. It's a weird thing. Like every single person I met at the Denver Collecticon, there's not a single person I don't like. Like I liked every single one of them. Tap Rock Bang says, every time I think about selling an expensive card, he gets anxiety over not being able to rebuy it. So so he's saying I just don't sell it at all. Tap Rock Bang, you are not incorrect with that thought process. I run through that same thing all the time. It's that constant internal battle you're going to have with yourself. And that was why, with all the greatness that was the end of 2020, early 2021, it was in a way, bittersweet thing because yes, some of the cards you will find yourself selling, you may never get those cards back. And you will definitely never get those cards back if you do believe in the long term of this hobby, where you think this hobby is going to have a continued uptrend. Or more importantly, even if you sell a card for, let's just throw out an arbitrary number, for $1,000, and you expect that card to actually decrease in value. Let's say that card has a 30% decrease. So now that card's worth $700. But if your original price point for that card was 100 and you sold it for 1,000, you still don't want to buy it back at 700 because your price memory of that card is $100. Does that make sense? Because when you originally got into that card, whenever you decide to get into it at 100, like that's might have been where you felt comfortable with that card. So even though that card, you sold it for 1,000, had a 30% price retrace, and now it's sitting at 700, you might still only kind of in a way value that card at a good deal at 100. So that price memory, even though it's already retraced a decent amount, 30% being a lot, you're already like, you don't want to buy that card. So there is that mindset that definitely goes into it. See Brett in the chat, Professor Oak, Chevals. I got to meet Chevals in person again. Great person. Ancient Mew's one that, you know what, we don't even know. Ancient Mew might have been at the Denver Collecticon, but because we've never seen his face, we don't even know what he looks like. Head Pokemon said Walmart is finally sold out. Well, that's good. It only took like 24 hours, which when you think about it, oh my God, that's so long. I hope, I mean, it's not something Walmart would ever do, but I would love to see the numbers that Walmart was able to sell, because we're coming out of the timeline of, remember when Pokemon Center would have like Pokemon Center exclusive ETBs, like perfect example being the Pokemon Center exclusive Evolving Skies ETBs. Like those things sold out instantly. And then we saw like a very, very quick restock of those like a couple months later. But then we never saw Evolving Skies Pokemon Center ETBs like pop back up. And those exist out in the wild. Like there's plenty of people probably in this chat alone own those Evolving Skies Pokemon Center ETBs, but they were relatively rare when everything was all said and done. But you think about, okay, well, that thing was only up on the website and Pokemon Center for an hour or two. And then for the second wave, it was up for like 15 minutes. Okay, if there's enough demand to buy Evolving Skies Pokemon Center ETBs and only allow those things to exist for like an hour, how many Charizard UPCs sold between all these websites in the multiple hours they were up, with some of them having absolutely insane limits per customer? Walmart having a customer limit of 10 Charizard UPCs per customer is a freaking ridiculous amount. It's ridiculous when you think about it. Let's see. So, Head Pokemon said they better have our pre-orders ready. I'm hoping our pre-orders actually work. This could be the biggest joke or the biggest like short-term loans that these companies have ever worked out. If all these companies have now taken our money, charged our credit cards, and then every single one of them gets canceled like after the fact, which I find that to be pretty unlikely at this point. Pokefresh said, did I miss the CTR rattle video this month? You did not miss it. The month is not over yet. So the next podcast with Rattle, Ryan, and myself will be on October 28th, immediately following Rattle's premiere. So if you guys do like that podcast series, like what is today? So like 5 days from now, that podcast will be on. It's always a fun time. I don't know. I never really know what we're going to talk about before it happens. It just kind of happens. And it's always an event to watch. So yeah, that will be this month's podcast will be October 28th. I recommend you guys all tuning in. So Pokefresh says, I think the Zard UPCs will be abundantly available for anybody who wants one. Everybody who wants one will be able to get at least one at retail. Pokefresh, I think that has already happened. I think you are 100% correct with that statement, but I think that statement has already played out, meaning anybody that truly wanted them at this point in the game has now had their opportunity. Head Pokemon said, there is a guy selling the promos for $100. So I'm guessing you're talking about selling the 3 promos raw, like for $100, and that makes sense. So, I mean, but even that, when you think about like what's in that product, you're getting the 3 promos, you get in the play mat, you get in the sleeves, the damage counters and the dice, but then more importantly, you're getting the 16 packs, and the 16 packs, like even when you break that down to like, $3 or $4 a pack, like it's still a substantial amount of money just in packs. So, and I think there's only like 3 of them are Evolving Skies. So maybe like there's a couple packs in there you might have to value at like $2, some are $3, some are $4, but still, it's pretty insane when you think about just the value of that. It's very similar to like when we saw the Celebrations UPC, when you broke that product down, and I think that was like 18 packs of Celebrations plus, the normal packs you got, plus the 2 gold cards and the Charizard and the Pikachu, again, that's the metal cards. But then when you talk about just the gold promos and you had the Pikachu and then the Pokeball promo, like that product alone, when you started to like call it cannibalizing it down and breaking that product down and selling it individually, it was like, holy crap, there is a ton of value here. Kevin Clare said, just buy in again, double your risks. Yep. This is not financial advice. If you guys want financial advice, go talk to Dan Catch'em All Collectibles. This is not financial advice on this channel. I need my disclaimer too. I'm not that good. I just need to hold up a piece of paper that said, this is not financial advice. So Tap Rock Bang says, what feels worse, being too cautious and missing out, or jumping the gun too fast and burning? That comes back to like risk tolerance and how liquid are you cash wise? Like, if you have the cash, it definitely hurts more when you missed out on the opportunity. Like, there's a couple plays in this hobby, like relatively recently, which were, I've talked about on this channel already. There was a play the same way I felt, or not the way I felt, but the same way I feel about the Charizard UPC. We saw another product relatively recently, like within a year's timeline, that I also felt exactly the same about. And that was the Japanese stamp box. When the Japanese stamp box came out, I was picking them up at between $200 and $240 a piece. And I went really what I considered to be really, really hard on those. And I picked up as many as I could. But, even at between 200 and 240, like, you start picking up enough of those, like, it's thousands of dollars, like you picked up 5 of those boxes, it's $1,000. You had the 2 promo cards, you sent them away at $100 a piece. So now for each 5 boxes you sent, you're into that box for $1,000 just on the boxes. Then to grade them at $100 a piece, that was another $2,000. So for every 5 boxes you bought, you had a $3,000 out there. The $3,000 is out there, and it starts to add up pretty quick. Like, you can only do that so much before, but then what happened? That Charizard's, or not Charizard, that Japanese stamp box with the Pikachu and the Cramorant, like, prices just started continually going up and up and up for those boxes. And then even as prices were continuing to go up, those cards were, new back Japanese. So, and they were non-holo. So they all graded extremely easy. Like, 10 rates for a card like that were astronomical. Like, even at 9s, you didn't lose money on it. But, then the prices of those boxes continue to go up and up and up until now. We look back on something like that and I say, these things were selling at $200, and I should have just bought even more than I did. But then I have to sit back and say, wait, for every 5 of these boxes I had $3,000 just out there. So buy 5, that's 3,000. Now you buy 10 boxes, that's 6,000. You buy 15 boxes, which 15 boxes, when you really think about it, isn't that much money. But 15 boxes, that means you now have $9,000 just floating out there, praying to God that these promos in PSA 9s and 10s don't absolutely just get destroyed, which it was the same exact thought process. The same thought process I had between those Japanese stamp box promos is the same thought process with the Charizard. And listen, we could have had the same exact video a couple months back, and every time I said the word Charizard UPC, I could have just replaced it with Japanese stamp box. Like, it would have been that simple. And did that play out? Yes. Like, yes. It's the proof's in the pudding on that one. Like, and in fact, it's still playing out for some people, Like, I sent away my very last set of Japanese stamp promos in my most recent $15 TCG special. So yeah. So to answer, and that was a very long-winded answer to Taprock's question of what feels worse, being cautious and missing out, or jumping the gun too fast and burning. So it feels worse when you miss out, in my opinion, because I feel like that was one of those examples that I missed out. The market was there. The liquidity was there. I mean, then, I never, like I said, I sent all my cards to PSA. I didn't send a single one of those cards to, like, Beckett. But I know there's a few people out there who, have some big balls and they know how to submit to Beckett, and they sent those cards, especially like, the Pikachu, and they sent it to Beckett and they were able to get a black label. And then the premium that card sold for black label in comparison to a PSA 10 was massive, just massive. So yeah, they exist. And that's a card that's when everything's all said and done, and the last card of that is graded a decade or 20 years from now, or 30 years or 50 years, however long it takes for all those cards to eventually work their way out of the market. And for the very last one to ever be graded by PSA, or PSA in 50 years from now doesn't even exist as a company and there's some other grading card company, the last card of that ever is graded from those Japanese stamp box promos, that population of card is going to be insane. And it's the same way as the Charizard UPC. When the very last Charizard promo from, depending on all three, like whatever three you want to pick, whenever that last promo is graded 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now in the future, when that last one is graded, that population will be just as insane. And you don't have to look that far. You can look as far away as Champions Pass Charizard V. Now, again, even that card gives you some decent like reassurance on any plays you're going to make, because what's a PSA 10 Charizard V promo from the Champions Path ETB? That card sells for like between $30 and $40 in a 10. That number is ridiculous. Like, that is a card that is literally the most graded card in the history of this hobby. You know, number 2 card being the Charizard from base set, but that Charizard V from Champions Path, the promo from the ETB, is like has a population of close to 40,000 cards graded, and that card in a PSA 10 still sells between $30 and $40. That is insane. That means that there is still enough demand for that card to keep that price in a PSA 10 above $30. That is the market. Like, if anybody wants to just say, point to one single example in this entire hobby and prove to me that this hobby is still strong, that is a one card you got to point to and just say, look at this card. It's still selling for greater than $30 in a 10. And there's 38,000 of these freaking things that exist. That is insane. And then rewind it like not too much further back and look at what the very first ones to hit market from that Charizard V, from that ETB. Look at what the very, very early ones sold for. And then that's the point where you'll then need to go into your bathroom and start puking, because it will make you sick when you realize like how much those cards are selling for right at release. So does it make me feel better about like certain plays I'm doing? Yes. Is it also bad to look at like very obvious recent plays and try to make comparisons? Probably also a bad thing, but you're going to find yourself doing that very often than not. Let's see. We got Pokemon Classics in the chat. We got Jesse Gutierrez Guitar says CGC vintage cards are the hardest cards to sell. Been trying to sell his for nearly a year. Is our CGC 8 EX cards? No one wants them. LOL. Yeah, man. Like, when you have oversaturation of the market and like there's just, the market's dictated. The markets prove what they want, what they're buying. You know, one of my most not one of mine, literally my most recent submission, I had a very few handful of celebration cards in it, like the Zekrom and the Venusaur and the Blastoise, and the Xerneas was in there. Do you want to know the cards? And they all hit 10s, but the cards that have sold the best for me on my most recent submission from PSA were all those celebration cards. Like, almost instantly, all those things sold. So gives you something to think about. Like, we talk about all the vintage and we talk about the niches of the niche, but what is the market buying at an extremely insane price? You know, like, I'll give you an example, like the Venusaur, for that card to be graded was $18. That card raw is like a $3 to $4 card. So let's just say it brings you to like $22. That card in a 10 is selling between like $60 and $80 for a 10 in that card. Where's the profit margin for being into a card for $22 and selling it between $60 and $80 in a 10? And again, that celebrations Venusaur or Blastoise, like, yeah, I guess the Charizard is still relatively pricey, but like, or even like, you know, the Umbreon Gold Star stuff, like Umbreon Gold Star is probably a lot more just for the raw price. That's why I really talk about like the Venusaur, the Blastoise, the Zekrom. Like, when you look at those cards raw, look at what it costs to grade, and then look at what they're selling in a 10. Like, there is That is insane when you think about it. And when you talk about like effort required, some of these cards, like vintage cards, mainly sourcing vintage is extremely hard, especially sourcing vintage at high grades. You can find yourself spending days and months and sometimes years searching for certain cards in high grade raw vintage. Modern, the level of effort required is not even close to that. As simple as going onto eBay, searching lowest price first, making sure the card's not totally jacked, and then just hitting buy it now. Or finding somebody who's, got a listing and they're currently selling 15 of them. And you put your quantity to 15 and you just freaking buy them all. And you just say YOLO it. And then you get that single seller sends you 15 cards. You go through it, you pull out your best five, and then you submit those, and it's a whole like rinse and repeat thing. And the level of effort required for vintage versus modern is extremely drastically different. And sometimes like the return for the super modern stuff is there way more than the vintage. Like I can't deny it because I'm literally witnessing it play out before my own eyes, like as we speak. So, but it doesn't defeat the fact of like the fundamentals of certain cards, but sometimes the market just doesn't care. Fundamentals could freaking mean nothing to some people. So Pepsi Summer says he just bought 2 Charizard UPCs for 342, shipping and taxes included. He said he heard they go for 200 on Amazon. Worry this will be I'm worried this will be $500 later, so I thought I should pick them up now. I don't know who you heard that from, Pepsi Summer, but you could have went as late as recently as yesterday. You could have went on Walmart, like during Catch 'em All Collectibles Live. They were still available on Walmart.com as recently as last night for 120 a piece. So I hope you didn't spend too much on them. And I don't, if they're going for $200 on Amazon, that's, you got to learn to like shop around a little bit more and maybe find that better price. Let's see. Pokemon Classic says liquidation and consolidation phase coming. Yeah, I kind of talked about that too with the consolidation phase, meaning have your collection have an identity to it. And I think that's what I meant by consolidation. Like, but we're going to see it. We're going to see the hobby start to liquidate and then also consolidate. But it's just going to be a question of like, what are people consolidating to? You might find yourself having a ton of people just consolidate into high grade modern. But this is the thing where from the outside looking in, or if anybody were to come up to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about making a hard play into modern, like, what's your recommendation? Like, should I go picking up a lot of these cards in PSA 10s and investing in the 10s, the high grade? Where normally I think that is a very good mindset. You should always like try to go after, the PSA 10s because those will normally be the cards that no matter if the market's up or down, like no matter where the market is, that card will always be selling on the highest end for that card. Yes, the price may be way lower than you bought in, but whatever the market's dictating, that 10 is going to be at the highest. But my recommendation to somebody would never be for them to buy that card. If they were talking about a vintage card, maybe. But for a modern card, my recommendation 10 times out of 10 times to that person would be what I just said. Pick up a bunch of those cards raw. If you're willing to pay the PSA 10 price, try to get it yourself. Your chances of actually grading a lot of these cards yourself, hitting the 10s are probably a lot lower than a lot of people think they are. Or the chances of not hitting that 10. We have a lot of modern cards currently on the market that have like 80% 10 rates, meaning if you send out 10 cards, like statistically speaking, 8 of those 10 cards are going to hit the 10 for a lot of modern chase cards. The number one, modern chase card that instantly comes to mind that has like an 80% gem mint rate is the Moonbryon from Evolving Skies. That card, which is defying all logic that everyone always has. Like, and it's a card that I kind of already beat the dead horse on, but that card defies the law of supply and demand, right? Because the law of supply and demand is very simple. The way it's dictated is with more supply comes less demand, and with less demand, you see lower prices. But for whatever reason, that Umbreon is doing the complete opposite. With greater supply in a 10, we're seeing greater demand, and with greater demand, we're still seeing greater prices. And that sentence defies like every textbook of how supply and demand works. Like, trust me, when you have a greater supply on the tail end, you should not be seeing greater prices. But for whatever reason, that Moonbreon from Evolving Skies, that's how it's playing out. Is that a permanent thing? Is that a thing that's going to keep going on forever? Heck, if I know at this point. Like, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to Moonbreon, because it's continue. Like, I thought that card was overvalued at 600, and then 800, and then 900, and then 1,000 and 11,000, and then now we're getting into the realm of like, what kind of market manipulation's going on? And then the question is, there's well over 1,000 of those cards in the population. Like, now we start to get into the point of people are manipulating this market. Like, they're doing it on a high end, to manipulate a card that has populations in the greater than 1,000. Like, it takes a very savvy type of investor to be able to manipulate that sort of market. People are talking about Cheval's accent. Cheval's does have that thick French accent. Let's see. Pepsi Summer said he's graded 500 plus cards from PSA in 2021 to 2022, kept all the 10s and sold the rest. It took near 16 weeks to sell 300 slabs of random vintage modern cards. Cash flow was 17K. That was consolidated into other areas. Yeah. And, it took you 16 weeks to sell 300 slabs. And that's the thing. It's like, you would really have to have like a in-depth conversation with you. It's like, well, how are those slabs priced? Did you send them to auction? Did you send them through a middleman service? Which middleman service did you send to? How are those cards priced if they were buy it now auctions on eBay? How are they priced in comparison to all other of that same exact grade on the market? Were you lowest on the market, or were you mid-range, high end? That's where that conversation starts to take place. Or he says a combination of vintage cards. Were you extremely lucky and some of those cards you got were one of ones, and the ones you were selling was literally like the only card available on eBay for that? But yeah. Let's see. I see a bunch of people chatting. I see we got Basic Trainer in the chat. I did get a Medjai Raichu from Basic Trainer. I wanted him to sign the slab. He only signed the plastic sleeve, but I appreciate you, Basic Trainer, and that's a Raichu that will now be part of my PC from now until the end of time. So I'm super appreciative of that. Basic Trainer says, if we're all making the same play, who will buy from us? Basic, they're out there. I don't know who they are, but they're out there. I don't know how long they're going to be out there for. It's almost unbelievable, the market that's buying this high-end stuff. I guess it's considered high-end. Like, for me, I think Pokemon, like, high-end on this hobby is super subjective. I mean, there's some people out there probably listening to this video and they think a high-end card is anything that sells for greater than $100, and then maybe other people are saying no, 5,000, 10,000. And then I probably have some people out there that's no, high-end starts at 25,000 plus, or high-end starts at 50,000 plus. Like, there's a lot of different people. We're going to have a lot of different conversations on what they think high-end is. Like I said, the high-end conversation for some people might start at 100, and for that other person it might start at 50,000. So it depends where you are in that conversation of what you think is high-end. But people are buying it, man. I don't know how long it could last. It's almost, you would think it's unsustainable at this point, Basic, but I don't know. So Ancient Mew says, PK, if I were to sell my 3 raw Moonbreons, what grail card should I buy with that cash flow for the hobby? Ancient Mew, if you are selling your Moonbreons raw, you are insane. You are insane to do that. Do you know how many people are still making that move, picking those cards up raw and grading them because of like what we're seeing happen with the current Moonbreon price? Ancient Mew, do me a favor. You got 3 raw Moonbreons. you're sitting on them. You're not, just send them away. Send them. Get them out. Get them out. Get them the PSA right now. I don't care if you send them at 30 or 50 or whatever you want to send them at. Just, I don't care if you want to send them at the TCG 15 specialty and then pray to God that you don't get upcharged when those things hopefully hit 10s. You have 3 of those cards. Like I just said, that card has a gem mint rate of 80%. You have an extremely high likelihood of 2 of those 3 cards hitting a 10. And in all reality, you might have still a good chance of all 3 of those cards hitting a 10. Do not, do not, do not sell those cards raw. Please do not do that. Let's see. Catch 'em all collectibles said cash is king, cash is king, cash is queen, cash is the prince, cash is everybody in that entire ruling family. Let's see. Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying cash is king. Yeah. When everybody is cash poor, it really will feel good if you have a lot of cash on hand. And this is the thing. In this hobby, to have to like free up money by selling stuff is nothing new. That is nothing new. Like, especially on the very high end, when you start talking about cards that are like, plays that are $100,000+. Trust me, there's a lot of people that I personally know have to start freeing up cash in order to make these plays. But now this is the thing too. You might come across, like, in this hobby, a time where you're only going to come across like a deal, whether it's like a collection buy or something, where maybe that collection buy only comes across like once a year or once every 2 years, or sometimes on the higher end, like once every 5 years or once every decade. You do not want a once in a decade type buy to come across you and for you to just not be able to make any sort of play on that, because then you will really kick yourself. So, so yeah, cash is king. It's always nice to be very liquid when it comes to cash, especially to be liquid when this market sometimes feels to be illiquid depending on what you're selling. And that's the thing. This market is super liquid on other stuff. Like, I don't know. Let's see. Before the Echo said, at Knowledge Cards, how would you identify your collection? That's a good question. I don't know how I'd identify my collection. I would identify my collection as well loved. That's how I love my collection. Everything I have, I'm in love with every single card that I currently have in my collection. Wow, chat's really popping tonight. Appreciate all you guys chatting. Mason Berry said, Pokemon market is too big to fail. Yep. Pokemon market is the Enron of all collectible hobbies. Too big to fail. Oh, wait, no. Lehman Brothers was too big to fail. Enron was just a Ponzi scheme. I guess you can maybe make the argument of both. That is true in this hobby. But, all right, guys. Like I said, I did promise my wife that I would watch the new Game of Thrones episode with her. I told her I would be done with the live at 9:30. I have now gone way past that timeline, so I'm sorry. But listen, if you guys are new to this channel and you're just discovering me now, I do a lot of these conversations. I usually have a lot of guest hosts on. This Friday coming up, I'm going to have the monthly podcast with Cool Trainer Ryan and myself and Rattle. I definitely recommend you tuning into that. The only way you're going to know when that goes live, you got to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And if for, the 90 people currently watching this live right now, if you could do me a solid, you just hit that like button. If you appreciate this content, by hitting that like button, maybe the YouTube algorithm, for whatever reason, will pick it up, push it out to more people. And hopefully pretty soon we'll be able to hit the goal of 6,969 subscribers, because that is the goal of the channel. What happens after that goal, your guess is as good as mine. But for every single one of you guys out there, appreciate every single one of you.